very good evening to you. Welcome to another Hot Button Issue broadcast right here on Choice Television. With me, Timothy Polium. We conclude at about 10 minutes after 10 o'clock this evening with the clip that peaked. Obviously, there's no shortage of issues to discuss in the run-up to the island's next general election, and the opposition United Workers' Party hosted a press conference earlier on today where there's some kind of weeping took place. And the opposition parliamentarians and also politicians made a case on several fronts, looking at, for example, the high cost of school books, the high cost of education in St. Lucia, and also increased taxes. The latest would have been the increase on vehicle licenses, which came into effect on the 1st of this month. That was yesterday. To discuss these issues, my guests, ladies first, Ms. Nancy Charles, who is the treasurer of the opposition United Workers' Party, and Mr. Dominic Fadee, the United Workers' Party's endorsed candidate for Astoria Canaries. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Tim.
Those are populist issues. Those are issues that would resonate with the electorate. So against the background of having said that, is it a kind of method that's being employed by the opposition right now to pander to the electorate, to pander to the voters, looking at issues relating to the high cost of education, which is something that's been with us for quite a very long time. It's not because the St. Lucia Labour Party is in office right now that we're experiencing this particular problem. What's your
Well, they're popular issues because they're real issues and they affect many families. And the situation is very grim for a lot of people. Those stories that we told today were very, very real. When I go around the constituency and I meet people, the cry is, we can't afford it. We can't afford the school books. We can't afford the fees. We can't afford the transportation fees. Our principals will tell you that there are many children who are coming to school not very regularly because they don't have anything to put in their lunch kits from their parents. So yes, it's a popular issue, but we're by no means trying to politicize it. We're just trying to invoke more discussion, invoke a debate. We're just trying to share with the country our ideas as it relates to the development of a critical sector of our country.
But I'm sure that, Ms. Charles, people will tell you, at least some of them will tell you, that things have not exacerbated since the St. Lucia Labour Party came into office as far as the cost of education is concerned.
Actually, Timothy, yes, people have been crying out for a long, long time about the standard of living or the high cost of living in St. Lucia. And as you said in your preamble, it is something that has been with us for a while. As a party and as St. Lucians, you would recognize and appreciate, since these issues have been there for a long time, you would expect that a current government would have ensured that they put certain measures in place to at least mitigate the effects of it, and so that persons would not necessarily be feeling that impact so much. And this is what we are trying to raise, and this is what we are trying to get the discussion on, that you need to ensure, yes, these issues are there, we understand the economic situation, we understand the issue with finances, but we are also saying that there are certain measures and there are certain things that we can put in place and certain things that maybe we can do to help mitigate.
Are you saying that this is not a caring government as far as education is concerned in St. Lucia?
In my opinion, and as a parent and as a typical St. Lucian, I do not think that the priority that should have been given to education has been given to education. We keep hearing the cry of parents, we keep hearing the cry of students, you keep hearing the cry of principals. I have a child at primary school, a child at secondary school, and also a child at Sir Arthur Lewis. And in most of all of these instances, every single week, every single month, you hear about fundraising activities at those schools to purchase basic supplies at the school. Sometimes the children are asked to come to school with things like toilet paper and tissue. So I am saying that the focus and the emphasis on education, in my opinion, is not there.
Isn't it safe to say that you can afford it? You can afford to contribute towards the education of your kids?
Every single parent in St. Lucia is contributing towards the education of their children. In one way, shape, or form, we are contributing. Everybody has to do their part, and we understand that. But I think of late, a greater emphasis or a lot more is being required of parents. And what you see happening is more is required of parents, less is being put on the government. But this same government is also implementing and putting more burden in terms of taxes and everything else that a parent has to take out of the income. And so more is required from you when you have less.
But certainly, Mr. Fadee, the government is playing its part through the various bursary programs and the $500 assistance to secondary school students who are entering the system for the first time in Form 1. What do you say to this?
I'm saying that it's a time to be creative, it's a time to be innovative, it's a time for new ideas to come to the fore. So
but what do you say to the assistance that the government is giving?
So that we have a better return on our investment. It's a time for us to relook at the entire system to ensure that the monies that we're investing, that we get the best returns from them, and that we can reach as many children as possible so that the impact is greater. That's what I'm saying. So we're not saying that the contribution that governments have been making, whether it's UWP or SLP governments, have not been substantial in terms of when you look at the education budget as a percentage of the recurrent expenditure. But despite this, we still have the problem of inadequate school feeding programs. We still have the problem of high transportation fees. We still have the problem of very expensive textbooks. But most importantly, out of the reach of many children and out of the reach of many families. And this, I believe, has caused a tremendous hardship on our people. This, I believe, does not all go well for the development of our people. This, I believe, does not all go well for getting people out of poverty situations into the lower middle class and into the upper middle class. And so regardless of how much we're spending, the fact of the matter is we have to look at our results and we have to focus on how are we going to take the country forward? How do we go to the next level? And I think it's an obligation of each generation to come up with new ideas. And what has happened in the past and what's happening now is very relevant, but we have to look at the future.
Is it worth giving the government some praise on the initiatives I made reference to early on? The $500 check or allowance being given to students attending secondary school for the first time, and also the bursary program, and also you have the laptop program as well. Is it worth saying that the government is at least trying in those respective areas that I made reference to?
Yeah, I didn't come on the show to politicize this issue.
No, but
it's too important.
Remember, I did not say the St. Lucia Labour Party.
Correct.
Administration, I said the St. Lucia government.
Yes, correct. Those are well-meaning initiatives, and the intent behind them are good. But what we're saying is that the problems still exist, and what we're saying is that we need to go further beyond laptops. I can tell you as well that the laptop program is a great maybe initiative whereby it's incomplete when you do not have e-books for the kids to download. You still have the problem of a high cost of education. So on the one hand, it's a good start, but we have to go further. We have to use every opportunity to reduce the cost of education and explore more technological advantages and opportunities that are created with information technology.
I think, yes, it is commendable that the government has continued some of those initiatives. So, for example, the government came in and there were the school transportation subsidies, there were the school feeding programs, and the government has continued it. But what we have also noticed of late is that the government has reduced on the subsidy that they were given to the school transportation and the school feeding program. And so that says a lot to us in terms of, yes, the initiative is there, yes, we are continuing it, but how much more are we putting into it? Because right now it's demanding a lot more. You find that increasingly parents are of struggling maybe to send the children to school. And so when you reduce the school transportation subsidy, it creates an added burden on the parent in terms of finding transportation money to ensure that those children are going to school. And we do understand in terms of poverty, I think it was Sir Afal Lewis who said that the cure for poverty is education. And we cannot make education out of the reach of our children if we expect to get them out of poverty. It has to be something that is accessible to every single St.
A principal said once to me, Tim, that there is a family of 5, and the parent would come to her and say, well, I can't afford the school feeding fees. They're only $1. It goes to show you the extent of how people are finding it difficult. And she said that they had a deal to put the kids on rotation because they didn't have access to education. Another principal tells a story where 65% of her students are on the school feeding program, and the school feeding program in her school represents the kids that normally can't afford something in the lunch kit. So times are very, very tough. People's situations are very, very real. And we have to come up with solutions. We have to have a discussion that will take us out of this. Let's come up with some new ideas.
But isn't it safe to say, Mr. Fadee, that times are always tough? Whether you're talking about now in 2015 or whether you're talking about 2007 or 2008 when the United Workers' Party was in office. The reality of the situation I'm putting to you is that reduced subsidies is a clear indication of government having financial problems.
Well, the government has to be more creative in coming out of those financial problems.
What are you suggesting?
I'm suggesting that instead of stimulating and being traditional and funding the social sector and social works and infrastructure, where you have to import so many raw materials and the job generational potential is not as great as, for example, if you were in the United States of America and you were building roads and you had raw materials coming and spurring other sectors like manufacturing, then you would get out of it. But if you fund your productive sectors, like agriculture, like tourism, then I believe that you would stand a better chance of being able to better fund your social services. And so the key to getting out of this economic mess that we're in is to fund the productive sector. This is how Obama made it work for the Americans. We have a great example in the world now where Europe chose austerity to cut and cut and cut, brought a lot of hardship on their people, send the wrong confidence to the private sector, and they're still struggling to come out of it and came out of the crisis a lot slower. But the Americans rebounded a lot stronger because they were creative, they stimulated the automobile industry, they stimulated other sectors where they saw clear advantages. And it's a great opportunity as well.
But quite from agriculture, sure. Which other sector you think can be stimulated in St. Lucia?
The tourism
that
sector.
Will improve?
The tourism sector. A lot of distress hotels.
To what extent?
A lot of distress hotels exist.
More concessions for the hotels? Is that what you suggest?
A lot of distress hotels exist presently. And those hotels are in bad shape. They need investments in their room stock. They need additional support in terms of getting some of them reopened because they have been closed. And we have to look at why they were closed, help them with their management systems. And we have to seek opportunities for temporary joint venture initiatives. It's a government's responsibility to create jobs. It's a government's responsibility to stimulate confidence in the economy. It's a government's responsibility to rebound its productive.
But the government has played its part by providing concessions, unprecedented levels of concessions to the various hotels in St. Lucia. Take, for example, when FAT was implemented, it was at a reduced level for the hotel sector.
Well, it's not as competitive as our Caribbean brothers and sisters, which is why you see that the United Nations Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, they're projecting that a country like Antigua is going to grow at 5.3% because of their aggressive attraction of investment. They did some real creative things in going very further than we did, whereby what they did was they allowed concessions on food and beverage and other inputs into the hotel sector. So it made investment a lot more attractive. You go to a country like Grenada, the same thing happened. Barbados has totally restructured its Tourism Development Act to also include a more generous, a more attractive. And what has been the result? This year, they've had a 15-point-something odd increase in tourism arrivals
but
to the country.
The same Barbados also retrenched 3,000 government workers.
But at least they are on the road to recovery. They're on the road to recovery, whereby their key sector, the tourism sector, has had a phenomenal year. And they haven't had such a growth year in a long time. And this is coinciding with a more attractive investment regime. And that's what we're saying.
When will the United Party come out with the specifics in terms of coming up with an alternative plan to the St. Lucia Labour Party administration instead of just criticizing? Any opposition party can do that, but laying out the specifics in terms of the alternative, what you'll be doing, and saying this is what I will be implementing so that that could redound to the benefit of my people.
Timothy, every time we've had an opportunity to criticize the government on a particular issue, we've also given them an alternative. We've given suggestions, and you had a lengthy discussion with my colleague, Mr. Fadee, just a few minutes ago with reference to possible solutions to some of the issues and some of the problems that we are facing. The United Workers' Party is very cognizant of the fact that we have issues. We also understand that the road to recovery is not an easy one, and the solutions may not necessarily be easy solutions as such, but at every opportunity we get, we also present, and we give the government practical solutions that can be implemented. We're not going anything high-handed. So for example, with reference to the school transportation, we're saying that the government can increase the subsidy that they are currently giving to ensure that more students have access to the school transportation. We don't think that is something that is too hard for the government to do.
Where will the money come from?
Well, the government has to be creative, as we say, in terms of sourcing funds. The government, one of the key issues that people say to us on the ground is, well, where did the government get $150 million to construct a four-lane highway, which in their opinion and in the opinion of majority of St. Lucians is not a necessity right now. And so the government they can look at creative ways in terms of other areas that they can look at, and in terms of, you know, it's a matter of priority. How do you prioritize what you think is more important?
Tim, I think you're spot on as it relates to...
Well, I'll point with you for a commercial break. Back in just a moment to continue the discussion. You're watching Hot Button Issue right here on Choice Television, where we continue our build-up to the island's next general election. I'm sure that in the weeks ahead we'll be focusing on other important areas. Take, for example, the crime situation, healthcare. But this evening we're focusing on the recent increase in taxes with regard to the license fees, and also we're focusing on education as we're getting all set to commence a new academic year on Monday of next week. And certainly we'll be taking your calls on the issues that we have highlighted so far during this evening's Hot Button Issue with my guests, Ms. Nancy Charles and Mr. Dominic Fadee, who is the United Workers' Party candidate for Ancillary Canneries. Please stay with the broadcast. Welcome back. Thank you so much for staying with us. Once again, you're watching Hot Button Issue on Choice Television with me, Timothy Pawley. Mr. Fadee, I think you're about to make a point just before we took the commercial break.
Yeah, I think that you were spot on. As it relates to, traditionally, I know that politicians and opposition political parties tend to be just obstructionists. You know, they criticize, but they're short on specifics. But I don't think that we're short on specifics tonight. If you ask us what we think, we will tell you exactly what we believe the solutions are. We spoke tonight about e-books, about the use of more information technology so that we can attempt to reduce the cost of education, particularly the area of textbooks that many families are finding it difficult to afford. We spoke tonight about subsidy and cutting an area that is not much of a priority, and looking for savings and being more creative, and ensuring that you seize every opportunity to be innovative in the management of government.
But in terms of specifics,
sure.
What are the radical changes you think that should be effected so that, for example, we have that kind of development whereby people can really take advantage of the opportunity to learn and to make a vast difference in their lives and the lives of their family as well? Because we've heard from Professor Beckles that we don't have a sufficient number of people from the small islands, the sub-region in particular, graduating from university. How do you change this in terms of ensuring that you do something that is grand, something that is significant to make those necessary adjustments in the education system?
A joint approach by the public sector and the private sector is very necessary. We have a number of discussions that are taking place within our Education Policy Committee in the United Workers' Party. And some of the things that we're discussing would revolve around, for example, having stronger school boards so that there's an amalgamation of skills from the private sector, where schools where you have parents with very strong private sector backgrounds and leadership backgrounds, that they can add and contribute towards the development and running of schools efficiently, against the background that many of our principals do graduate into the position from an education background, and then they're being thrusted into a position of managing a school and managing a facility that is very critical towards the running of the education system. We've also discussed the idea of external campuses so that we can team up with reputable universities. There are some university colleges here, and there are some underutilized secondary schools on the island. And I believe that if we had some external campuses where they were accessible to people in rural communities, we can expand the UE program with night college programs, not just at Sir Arthur Lewis Community College, but in the north and in the west and in the east where possible, so that we make it more accessible to a number of people. So government can say, okay, we're going to put in the infrastructure. What you're paying in rent, we put this as a contribution towards, you use the facilities here, and we put this as a contribution towards education development in the country. You administer the curriculum, and I think that this would encourage more reputable international institutions to come and set up shop, because the investment framework is right. They don't have to think of rental costs, they don't have to think of constructing buildings, but they can use what exists already, against the background that we have fiscal challenges, there are tough economic times that we face, and against the background that it's a difficult time to govern. I'm not going to take that away from the government, but this is what I mean by being more creative, by using what you have and pick the low-hanging fruit so that you can make little strides. And when the ideal situation arises, then you take up that opportunity.
But clearly, Ms. Giles, there's also a responsibility for parents in terms of planning your family, ensuring that you certainly can find yourself in a position to adequately finance the education of your kids, instead of having 4 or 5 children and then depending on the government.
Planning is, I think, something that parents do every single day. One of the challenges that you face, though, as a parent and as family is one where there is no job security anymore for families. And so at any point in time, you would have either one parent or both parents in a house who are not earning. And so then it becomes very difficult to plan, because you now have to prioritize whether you're going to eat or whether you're going to send your children to school. In terms of the family planning aspect of it, if you look at it, and over the last couple of years, you've been hearing that there's been a reduction in terms of the number of students who are entering the kindergarten. So clearly it says that in terms of family planning, something is happening within the country in terms of persons probably are not having so many children as before. But I do not think that the issue is the fact that they have so many children. The issue is that the cost of living has become increasingly very high. You have every single year additional taxes, additional costs are being added on the income that the parents are earning, but then you do not hear that there is an increase in the income of those families.
Will this change if the United Workers' Party get into office? Will the United Workers' Party manage to change this?
I think one of the things that the Labour Party campaigned about when they came into office was with reference to the Labour Code, but there was not a lot of emphasis in terms of looking at the wages and the salaries and the basic and the minimum wage of people. So definitely this is something that a United Workers' Party government will have to look at early o'clock in terms of revisiting it and looking at possible recommendations.
But the United Workers' Party sat on this issue of enacting the Labour Code for so long. I remember Labour Relations Minister, Mr. Edmund Estefan, promising over an extended period that the labour laws of senatorial would be revised, and he failed miserably in that regard. Any guarantees that the future United Workers' Party will fare any better on this issue?
Well, the implementation of any legislation will always be very, very difficult, Tim. Look at the current constitution Reform Commission. How long have they been working on this report? And the process is going to take a long time. It has to go through different stages of consultation. It has to, we live in a democracy, and so we've got to ensure that every single sector, all the stakeholders are happy, and we don't hurt any sector. And there are a lot of concerns from the private sector. They drive the economy, they are the engine of growth, and so we have to ensure that they are happy as well, in addition to the workers. So it's a happy medium. The private companies have got to be responsible.
But the business interests normally have the greatest say compared to the ordinary man in the street when it comes to enactment of legislation.
Well, I'm not, I can't say that that is a fact. That might be your opinion, but I can't say that I have any empirical evidence to support that the businessman would have a say. Some can argue as well that politicians tend to pander to the populist issues. And some can argue that politicians normally cower to the spending power of companies. I think it's one of those things. It's always very difficult for governments across the world, and especially in the absence of any legislation to touch on issues like financing election campaigns, then you will always have this problem.
Opposition parties normally ask for a lot from administrations. And in this case, we're calling for the government to inject more funds and for there to be increased subsidies and so on for transportation and things of that nature. But the government would try to raise some funds by increasing, in this case, the license fees for vehicles, and there would be an uproar. The government just can't do anything right for opposition political parties.
Timothy, in terms of the increased subsidies, we're not asking the government to increase it to a level that it was not at. The previous administration, when they were in power, they spent approximately $3 million in transportation subsidies, about $1.5 to $2 million in the school feeding program, and about $1 million in the book rental and the uniform program, so approximately $6 million. What we're saying is now the government from last year, they put all the subsidies together, and it was just a $4 million subsidy combined. And then it has also been reduced this year to $3 million. All we're asking is that they put it back to maybe an average of $5 million. So put a little bit more back instead of reducing that subsidy, because it is affecting a lot more children and households and families. We're asking them to put it back to a reasonable level. So it is not something that is unreasonable we're asking. But what is happening is, if you have reduced those subsidies, but yet still you continue to increase, for example, you now have an increase in the license fees. And so this increase, this added maybe $200 or $300 depending on the type of vehicle that you have. It is also taken from the pockets of parents who now have to still send their children to school. So the impact of the license fee is directly impacting households and parents. So
it's also affecting businesses. The trucking sector, they have fallen on hard times as a result of the decline in the construction industry. And I believe that due consideration should have been given to that. That sector is very uncompetitive right now and very unprofitable. And a lot of the businesses are struggling. A lot of the truckers are struggling. So we're saying that it's a bad time to do it for a number of people, especially in this economic crisis.
Is there ever a good time when you're increasing taxes?
Not necessarily, but you have, as of 1st of July, there was a 1% that was added to the service charge. And that is a 1% that small businesses, small companies now have to incur. And in addition, you now have the vehicle license fees. And so the small businesses who have goods, vehicle, panel, vans, all these are affected. And so you find it's just happening one after the other after the other. You saw that with the implementation of VAT, a number of small businesses closed down, although maybe persons did not want to admit it, but it was as a direct result of the implementation of a 15% VAT. And so I think the government has to be a little bit more mindful when you implement those additional fees. You have to find out what is happening. You have to see what is happening on the ground, what is happening within your business sector, what is happening within the private sector, and to ensure that at the end of the day that you know, those businesses can absorb it. You know, right now, you would find if you go out on the streets, a lot of people are bawling, businesses are bawling, people are complaining because they are just not able to absorb those taxes and those increases one after the other.
There is a right time to implement taxes, and that is when businesses are doing well and when an economy is growing. not when an economy is contracting, not when the business community is
But no
crying
business
out.
interest will tell you that it's all right to tax me right now. No member of the St. Lucian Society or any society will tell you it's okay to tax me right now. So the time is never apt. And don't you think it's a case where, for example, sometimes we should be called upon to make certain sacrifices?
But reading of the economic environment is crucial in that scenario, so that you have to ensure that the business environment is right, that the economic environment is right, so that businesses can afford the taxes that you will place on them. But if several of them are closing, if several of them are retrenching, if several of them are going out of business, then that should tell you that your policies need to go in the reverse and not in the direction that you are continuing. And so, therefore, you have to again stimulate the productive sectors. I'll give you an example. The Social Economic Review showed that before Hurricane Tomas in 2010, we were producing bananas at a level of 40,000 tons. Okay? It brought in somewhere in over $40 million or 50 million annually. Now, the same Social Economic Review for 2014 showed that the banana industry is somewhere over 8,000 tons. Just 20% of what it was just 7 years ago. I am not referring to the era of green gold, where you had 175,000 tons at a peak. I'm referring to 5 years ago, when the sector was performing 5 times better than it is now. This is an area where government should invest. We know who the good farmers are, invest in them, give them the capital they need so that they can get their fields, so that they can get their farms back on track, so that we can raise exports. We are now importing bananas from the Dominican Republic and certain Latin American countries under the Winfresh brand. And our farmers are given a quota system. This is an injustice. This is a bad economic policy. And this is untenable for any government to stand by and allow this to happen. So we're saying that these are opportunities for growth in certain sectors to take place. But if the farmers have been hit by a hurricane, if they're still struggling with roads that have not been cleared and rivers that have not been desilted so that proper irrigation can take place, then we've got to help them and we've got to give them a helping hand. If you will have a capital expenditure program, that's where you invest it, that's where you put your investments, so that in a year or two, you will begin to see fruits from your policies.
With regard to
are not bad, but if you invest in social projects at the wrong time when your country cannot afford it, you will find yourself in all kinds of difficulties. So you, for example, I am sure that there are so many other things that you would like to do in your own life, but you have to think of your own economic circumstances and how much you're taking home on a monthly basis.
With regard to the increase of the vehicle license fees,
Sure.
How far will the opposition go in terms of causing the government to apply the brakes on this? Because I heard the former transport minister, Mr. Guy Joseph, making some reference to this, indicating to the government that it should put a halt to it.
Timothy, it is not the opposition who's going to go far, It is the public. It is the St. Lucian public who is demanding that there be representation, and they are demanding that the government put a stop to this at this point in time because they cannot afford it. And so what we have decided to do is to meet with the public sector unions. We're going to have a series of public meetings, town hall meetings, so that we are getting our cue from the general public. And so the general public is the one who's going to lead us in the final analysis as to what is the final decision to be taken. But what we are saying to the government, just like we did when we had the issue with the fuel and the fuel pricing mechanism, we said to the government that it was time that they revisited it. And we went out to the public, and the public said, listen, we are willing to join you in a march, in a campaign to get the government to listen. And we're saying as a party, if this is what it's going to take for the government to listen, then this is what we will do. But our cue, we will be taking it from the St. Lucian public.
There's still a chance of that haunting you if the United Workers' Party gets into office and starts to implement various initiatives and increase taxes, where the opposition St. Lucia Labour Party will take similar action against the UWP.
Sorry, come again, because I think your producer said something.
I'm just saying to you that, do you run the risk, if you take on that particular posture of criticizing the government and opposing the government on issues of that nature, raising taxes, that the same thing can happen to you if you get into office?
Politics will always be a contest of ideas, and I think that debates are very healthy, and is in the process of debate that the best versions of ourselves emerge. And no government will have a perfect policy. We're not asking for, manna to fall from heaven. We're just saying that this is our position. We're just saying that we would go in a different direction. We're just saying that people are hurting. We're just saying that people, the unemployment situation is untenable. And there's a different course to address it in a sustainable manner. Building roads, Timothy, is only a stopgap, and there's no guarantee that there'll be sustainable growth coming out of infrastructural projects. That is done in the hope that the sustainable productive sectors will come back around. And so your best chance is to invest in those sustainable productive sectors. That is what will build the roads, not the reverse.
We'll be back in just a moment to take your calls. You're watching Hot Button Issue. My guests this evening, Miss Nancy Charles and Mr. Dominic Fadee. Stay with us. Thanks so much for staying with us. We'll put a telephone number on screen right now so that you can call with your questions and comments for my guests. I'm referring there to Ms. Nancy Charles, the treasurer of the opposition United Workers' Party, and Mr. Dominic Fadee, the United Workers' Party's candidate for Ancillary Canneries. So we go up until about 6 minutes after 10 o'clock. We already have a caller line. Good evening. Go ahead with your contribution, caller.
Good night, Tim.
Hi, good evening to you, caller.
And good night to your guests, Dominic Fadee and Nancy Charles.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Mr. Fadee, I just called to decry the 250 staff members that was sent home from the hotel on the eve of an election, and you stood there and said nothing. I also called to decry that you are part of a hotel where the staff members are not unionized, and I also called to decry to Nancy Charles that you are part of an organization that cannot give an account for millions of Taiwanese funds. So I would like you all to respond to that. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. What's you?
Well, I think the last time I was here, I addressed it. I said that, an organization goes through restructuring, and that's what that was. And I'm not quite sure what else he wants me to say, but that's what that was. I think I said that the last time I was here.
What's you, Ms. Charles?
Well, Timothy, as a party, we have consistently said that the issue that has been raised in the public with reference to the Taiwanese funds has always been a witch hunt. The report has been thrown out of court, as a matter of fact, because there was a case filed both against the political leader and the chairman of the party, and a lot or majority of what is written in that report is just not true. It was just meant to be something to smear the reputation of good serving citizens of St. Lucia.
Good evening. Hot Button Issue, you on the air?
Hello?
Hi, good evening to you, caller.
Yeah, I can barely hear you, but anyway, I heard Mr. Dominic Fadee spoke about agriculture. Yeah, but especially the banana industry, but he failed to address the 24 imported crops, right? That can create much more money than the bananas.
One of them would be pineapple.
Beg your pardon?
One of them would be pineapple?
I can barely hear you.
Okay. Pineapple. I know you always speak about pineapple.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, what I'm telling Mr. Fadee that we have 24 imported crops, right? That has boost, right, or that has contributed, right, to our high import bill, right? And I've been on this government back for years, since 2013, right, about those imported crops, because most of those imported crops can grow here all year round, right? I've given them a breakdown where employment, it can create some thousands of farmers and can also bring in a lot of revenue for the country. So I want to ask Mr. Fadee, what are you going to do about that if you are getting the office?
Okay, thank you so much for calling, sir. Go ahead, Mr. Fadee.
I think we have that in common. I'm very big on agriculture, tourism linkages. And I believe that it's so important for the farming industry that we get this right so that we can ensure that our farmers have the best opportunity to have markets so that they can know what the hotel sector is buying. And I think that he's spot on. He's very spot on. We have to select those crops that we are competitive in so that there's sustainability in the project. And we ensure that farmers are aware of what the hotel sector is buying. And the farming community is aware at what quality, price, and at what quantity that the hotel sector is buying.
Another caller line. Good evening. This is Hot Button Issue. You're on the air.
Good evening, Tim.
Hi. Good evening to you, caller.
And good evening to your guests.
Good evening.
Good evening.
We have an amount of $47 million, which was collected by the previous government as airport departure tax. This present government has not told us what they have done with that $47 million. That would be very useful at this point in time to our economy. Wouldn't you agree?
Thank you so much for calling. Yeah.
Yes, I would agree, Timothy, because the airport development tax, it was a way of self-financing the development of the Humanora International Airport. And so I think that the government, I'm not too sure if the government has accounted for that money in terms of its purpose and its use, but if they have not, it would be a good time for them to account for that money.
Good evening. You're on the air.
Hello, sir.
Hi. Good evening to you, caller.
Yes, sir. Timothy, good night, sir.
Good night to you.
I'd also like to say good night to your guest, Miss Nancy and Mr. Dominic.
Hello.
Good night,
Hi.
caller.
Good evening, sir.
I need to make a comment based on the taxes. And I'm a vehicle driver, and I pay my taxes, but constant taxes that have been impounded on this society, sir, it is unbearable. It's ridiculous. This Prime Minister came with his slogan in the campaign during the last election and said he's going to provide better days and he's going to inject $100 million into this economy. That $100 million is being taken off the backs of St. Lucian. That $100 million is being the St. Lucian public are the one that has been paying for these taxes with VAT and increase of water by 66%. Now we have something on licensing. And my issue with the license increase, the government is supposed to be a government of all the people, not some people. I understand that the farmers are getting a free pass, and some taxi drivers are getting a free pass. But everybody that uses a vehicle in this country is supposed to be something right across the board. Wouldn't you agree? It cannot be for some people. The farmers are not the only ones that work on the country. While they are giving a tremendous effort to help our economy, they are not the only ones working in this country. So I am in disapproval of the new taxes on the vehicle license. Thank you.
Thank you so much for calling, sir. Hot Button Issue. Good evening. Hello. Good evening to you, caller. Hello. Okay. You want to respond to the contribution made by the last caller?
Timothy, I think the government has been, in a smart way, has tried to avoid a more massive demonstration by allowing the minibus drivers to remain at the same. And whilst I am not in objection per se in looking at various categories and to say maybe this sector and this sector, I think it was just a smart move on the part of the government, because a further agitation of the minibus sector in terms of the price of fuel and everything else, the extra taxes on the tires, all these things have impacted the minibus drivers.
I think we have a caller line. Good evening. Go ahead with your contribution, caller.
Yeah, good evening, Tim.
Hi. Good evening to you.
Good evening to Mr. Fadee and Miss Charles.
Good evening,
Good
caller.
evening, sir.
Okay, Tim, I listening to the show, and I've heard you make several comments about the $500 that the government is giving to the newly entrance of children to secondary school. Tim, I want to make that point. Any government, you see that giving people handouts. You know why they are doing it? They are doing it because they do not have what it takes to feed the people of the nation. So they're giving handouts. So this is a lousy government, number one. Number two, Tim, For instance, the government is boasting about the VAT is feeding people. Not the VAT, the NICE and the STEP program. Tim, the average person is working at the STEP program for $40 a day, 9 weeks a month. The total of $1,800 for the year. When you divide that by 12, the average person that the government is feeding have a little above $90 a month to sustain themselves for the year, team. Now, if a government team is interested in feeding people, why fool the St. Lucian public? Why allow your people to go in misery? And you are raising everything. You are raising taxes. You are raising vehicle license. You come with the 15% VAT. Team, everything that government is doing is to bring down the people of St. Lucia and bring the middle class to poverty, and the rich is getting richer. The people that in the circle of the government, they are doing very well, and other people are catching the royals. And Tim, I am telling you, I don't know, that government do not have a clue of how to run this country and how to treat the people of this country. And Tim, you've been on the street, you walk in the street of Castries, you're driving around St. Lucia. Tim, tell me, how many businesses, small businesses, that have been closed for the past 2.5 years? How many people, Tim, that cannot feed their children? How many people that don't know where the next meal is coming from? And you mean to tell me that government have the guts of saying that they are the government for the people? They are the government for them. You remember at one time, the SLP used to call themselves the Malawi government. So, Tim, what happened to that government that was defending and on the side of the Malawi? When I was growing up, Tim, what happened to the policies and the ideas of George Odlum fighting for the poor people of St. Lucia? What happened to these people? What is the problem with our present government? I just want to know, what is it in the pipeline for St. Lucian? How can we benefit our people?
Okay, thank you so much for calling, sir. Let's see if you have another call. Good evening, you're on the air.
Hello.
Hi, good evening to you, sir. You're on the air.
Yes, good. I just have a couple questions there.
Go ahead.
I just want to know your people there on, if they're aware what the causes of poverty are, because basically what they really seem to be doing is blaming the government for creating the kind of poverty that they're projecting to exist in the society. Brother Dominic Fadee, he said earlier about Grenada. I want Dominic to know, the deal Sanders got in Grenada, 40 years tax-free in Grenada. Don't you think that kind of break, given the kind of environment Grenada is in now, in the hands of the IMF home structure program, don't you think if Grenada was able to collect these taxes from a hotel like Sanders, 30 years tax break, and corporate tax in Grenada is 30%. Don't you think that it would have been better for the government of Grenada rather than create that kind of incentive for a hotel to come in? The other question I want to ask is that we keep saying that the government is giving out too much in social programs, yet Nancy Charles is saying that we should give a little more on the transportation. So what exactly are we saying? Because we're saying the government giving out too much in social programs. You must invest in social programs, because if you realize that if you are saying that the environment is difficult and it is hard, of course there's going to be increased poverty on people. You also have, we're talking about, Brother Dominic said earlier about the silting of the rivers. The hurricane was in 2010. So if you're talking about the desilting of the rivers, you had a government that remained in power for so many years. Why did they not desil the rivers and rebuild the roads? So I get in a kind of conflict a kind of conflict in terms of what exactly they're trying to say.
Do you want Mr. Fadee to respond to you?
And Sister Nancy, an opportunity to clear.
Sure.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sure. What we're saying, the foundation of your economic development strategy to create jobs cannot be the funding of social projects, but it has to be based on sustainable economic projects where your productive sectors, and in our case, they happen to be agriculture to a lesser extent and tourism to a larger extent. And we've got to ensure that those sectors are working well. So that's what we're saying. We're saying that, yes, we're agreeing with you that social projects are important, which is why Nancy was suggesting that there would be a subsidy for a very important social policy like education. And so, but what I'm saying is that when it comes to creating jobs, you cannot use social projects, you cannot depend on social projects to create a sustainable jobs plan. That's what we're saying. I hope that we have made that a lot clearer for that caller.
A final call. Good evening. Quick contribution, caller.
Yes. Good evening, sir.
Good evening to you. Quick contribution because we're about to conclude.
Good evening to your guest.
Yes, good evening.
Yes. What I would like to say is that we've been getting the runaround. Let us get some new ideas. Let us not just say that we are going to implement this, we're going to implement that. Give me some of your ideas. The 2015 to 2016 budget. Let us delete all of the taxes that the SLP has implemented. And let us hear what you all are going to do to get rid of that deficit. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Quick contributions because we're getting also to conclude the broadcast.
Yeah, but the deficit cannot only be one of the economic indicators that you focus on. You also focus on the growth. And if you focus on a growth strategy, then the growth will cancel out the deficit. But you've got to make sure that you have a strong and robust growth in the economy. And this is what we've been saying. So as a result of my contribution, we are positive that you must fund the productive sectors. And this is a real opportunity, and this is a sustained opportunity to get you out of the deficit by itself. But you've got to focus on growth, more importantly, and growth must be the first priority, not the deficit. So you can't put the economy in a burden. You cannot suppress the very thing that will take you out of the hole that you're in. So we need to create new wealth. We need to ensure that that environment is right so that new wealth can be created, so that people can have jobs, so that the confidence of the business sector, so that the international investment climate will see us as a country that's ready for business, and they will have confidence in that as well. And then
we'll take this as your final comments, so let's go quickly to Ms. Charles.
Okay.
Timothy, in closing, what I would like to say and the message that we would like to send out to this government is prioritize. We do not see that there is the priority being given to the sectors and to the areas that need the priority. And so the message that we're sending right now is very clear. Education is a priority, and we're asking the government to focus and to put a bit more attention on the education of our people.
Thank you so much for being my guest on this evening's Hot Button Issue.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you as always for being my guest on this evening's Hot Button Issue. Thank you so much for watching the broadcast and contributing via your calls. If it's Wednesday, we discuss a hot button issue right here on Choice Television. Time now for the clip that peaked. 4523046. We'll take another call. This is Newspin on Radio Caribbean International. Please send me your email as well. You're not receiving your email, and that is a little strange today. Your email address is newspin@rcistlucia.com. With regard to increases, all right, we have a call. Good afternoon, you're on the air. Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon, sir. You're on the air.
Yeah. Moi, je dis Kenny. Pardon. Tout ça, c'est peuple-là, là. Pardon, Kenny. Kenny, pardon. Pas mieux que c'est ça. Allez-nous. Kenny.
Okay, good. All right. Merci beaucoup. Anyway, I was just saying before we took that call, because he's pretending that he's crying, he's sobbing and saying to the Prime Minister, sorry for imposing all those taxes on us. that's the broadcaster. It's a very good evening. Join us same time next Wednesday for another Choice News Now. And, of course, Hot Button Issue. Goodbye.